Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to the training, learning, and development community. Thanks for joining us. Happy Wednesday to all of you. If it's the afternoon, the evening, the morning, wherever you are, glad that you're here. So we didn't have a broadcast last week. I kind of had to cancel everything. Got the COVID, and so I'm pretty much like over it now. So that's good. And now I am lucky enough to have rescheduled this one with Christy J Woods to talk about networking like an introvert and finding success doing that. And I'm excited about this because we had an open tables discussion. I guess it was a couple weeks ago, and I'm going to get that open table stuff going again. But where I was able to talk to Christy about being an introvert, and I definitely am an introvert. I'm an introvert. I'm also shy. So I am really glad that that we have this opportunity to chat, because this is something I can totally identify with. So Christy, I am sorry, I'm just seeing Kit Saul's post there. I want to go ahead and let you sort of talk about your background, and then I'm going to follow up with a few questions about your topic as well. So can you tell us just a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for inviting me. And it was just really cool opportunity to get to chat with you at the open tables, and it's cool to be here now. So thanks so much. I appreciate being here.
Great.
Yeah, so I've got kind of a whirlwind of a background. I started my professional career in counseling. So I was going to be a licensed psychologist and was getting my PhD, and life happened. And after 3 years in my PhD program, I left it and I transitioned into higher ed, and wasn't really sure like what I was going to do and where I was going to go, but I really just focused on professional development at that time. I got into a great mentoring program at the college that I was working at, and just really realized the power of people and mentoring. And so I kind of kept up with that, and wasn't really sure like where I wanted to go in my career and what I wanted to do. And I had some amazing mentors that really pushed me to, even if I wasn't sure what my exact goal was, just to continue going forward. And I landed in instructional design. And so I've been an instructional designer at a few different colleges. I'm a full-time instructional designer right now at an art and design college in Denver, and love it. And I kind of popped into the scene where a lot of people wanted to get into instructional design, which is a little wild for me because I hadn't even heard of it until I was an instructional designer. And I was like, well, what is this really cool career? And so coaching just kind of came by naturally for me. You know, I did career counseling when I was a counselor. And then so many people were interested in learning and development and reaching out to me and asking, what did I do and how did I get there? And my story around that is very much people-centered and very much networking-centered. And I really connected and cultivated relationships with current instructional designers, with people who were just doing amazing things like being a president of a college, or leading these huge like connectedness, socially embedded conferences and doing amazing things. And so now when I talk about like how I got into learning and development, I talk about networking and how important that was for me. And I think when people hear about networking, they, get a lot of anxiety around it. I certainly do too, as somebody who is introverted and also always trying to connect with people. There's a constant battle for anxiety for me. But what I noticed in my own journey and in the journey of others that I've coached and taught since is that networking is really boiled down to like people and relationship building. And so whenever I like teach and talk about networking, especially from an introverted perspective, I talk about like, well, how do you build any relationship? You have relationships in this world, and whether that is your partner or your child or the person that checks you out at the grocery store, like relationships are everywhere. And it's just about being person first. So that's where I like to focus a lot of my efforts in introversion and networking, and really focusing there. So it's been a cool journey, and yeah, I'm just kind of right in the middle of all of that.
So yeah, so this whole, the idea of, or your mission to help introverted professionals, like, did that come from your experience with other coaches and being mentored, or where did this mission begin, or what inspired you to actually move forward with this idea?
Yeah, so I think I take a lot of inspiration from a bunch of places. One is my own personal journey. So I think I have spent the majority of my life wishing I was more extroverted, and even so far as claiming to be extroverted when I wasn't, because I knew that the world really values extroversion. It really values being bubbly, being friendly, being outgoing. And so there are big moments in my life where I like looked at myself and I was like, man, I wish I was more. And I just recently have, like within like the last year, have come into this space where I can set boundaries around my own energy, which is really what introversion is all about. You may have folks that are introverted and shy. I love that when you introduced yourself, you were talking about that. Introversion doesn't always mean that you're shy. It doesn't always mean that you have anxiety, but it does mean that your energy doesn't come from socializing. It comes from usually being introspective and being by yourself. So I spent a lot of time really just within the last year of figuring out like where my own energy comes from, and how to cultivate that. And along the lines, realizing like, wow, I really am introverted, and it's okay, and it's a beautiful thing. So my own personal journey with just coming to terms of being more introverted. And I love, somebody put in the chat just now about sliding scales. Yes, it is not like I'm extroverted or I'm introverted. It is always on this kind of scale, and you could be more or less in different situations, different times in your life. I think we're all a little bit more introverted after COVID and having been isolated for a little while. The energy that it takes to be around a lot of people now is much harder than I feel like it used to be. So yeah, great point in the chat from Mark. But yeah, so I definitely went through this own personal journey. And at the same time, I was coaching, again, coming back to the space of people really wanting to get into learning and development. And I had done that, and I had done that from a very different career of counseling and higher ed. And I would talk to them, of course you're talking about resumes and marketing yourself through LinkedIn and cover letters and all this stuff. And then we get to networking and people would freeze and they're like, but wait, what do I do? And they would talk about how introverted they are and that they don't like networking. And it really sunk in for me there, where I was like, yeah, networking takes up a lot of energy, and especially if you're introverted. And there's this idea, I think it might be a little bit of society telling introverts that they don't have a space. Like you have to be the super on speed networker or else you're out of here. And I just thought like, okay, there's got to be something different here. We've got to make room for people, whether they're introverted, extroverted or not, to know that they can build relationships with who they want to build, and continue to develop their own careers too. So my own personal, and then just coaching people who were in that place, I think kind of brought me to this mission of really helping other introverts and folks who want to network and do it in a way that doesn't feel so transactional.
Interesting. Well, so why L&D professionals in particular? Like, so, that's kind of your target audience is people like, so, and I had actually a couple questions there, like, why L&D professionals in particular? And then also I'm wondering, do instructional designers tend to kind of be introverts anyway? Or
Mhm.
because even though I have talked to, I've literally talked to hundreds of people like on broadcasts and things like that, even, like the ones that do kind of face-to-face training,
Mhm.
many of them are like, oh, wow, after that, I am absolutely exhausted. Even though they love to do it, it
Yeah.
still just takes so much out of them.
Yeah.
There are people that like, trainers that do it and they're full on extroverts and love to train. And that's why they're in this whole business.
Yeah.
But there are those that love to do it, but it also just drains them like
Yeah.
nothing else. So those are my two questions. One, like why L&D professionals, and are you trying to help these folks? And then instructional designers in particular, do they tend to be introverted?
Yeah. I mean, great questions. At learning and development, I think I just kind of happened to be in that space. I happened
Okay.
to be an instructional designer and be going through these pieces myself. I happened to be coaching folks who wanted to get instructional design. And that I would say has mostly been driven by the people that have reached out to me. I've been very fortunate to build some incredible relationships with people that really want to pivot their careers. And so it was a pretty natural transition for me in that way. I will say too, though, especially instructional design, because it is somewhat of a newer career, or at least a career that's like on the outside of the like teacher, lawyer, doctor pipeline. A lot of career development in that is kind of an apprenticeship model. So you learn because of the people that you have worked with or the people that are training you. And for better or for worse, that has the ability to really shape your career. So instructional design specifically is networking. It is like discovering like, oh, I didn't even think about inclusive design before, but now I have, because I've connected with this person who's really into it. And oh my gosh, my eyes are open to this totally new aspect of design. Or I'd never even heard about scenario-based learning before. And now I know because this person has taught me this, and then they shared references and resources that I can learn further. So it's very much this mentorship, apprenticeship, networking model already. So I think that it's incredibly important for people in learning and development to really utilize that just as a way of learning and growing in their own field. I think that's kind of where I sit with it.
Yeah.
Now, you're asking, do I think that most instructional designers are introverted? I don't know. I'm not sure. I mean, I think so many people that I've met have either identified as introverted, or they'll say they're an ambivert, which goes back to introversion and extroversion being on a sliding scale. Nobody's ever 100% introverted or 100% extroverted. There are things that give us energy and drain us throughout the day that may be more or less introverted and extroverted throughout the time. So I would say that most people will identify with the fact that things will drain them. And oftentimes it is around networking. It feels draining even for extroverted people. And I have a really close friend who I think is the highest extroverted I've ever seen on the Myers-Briggs, like as far as you can go. I was like, wow, I'm really jealous at the time that I wasn't really accepting of my own introversion. And even she was like, yeah, like a job fair, worst nightmare, because what do you talk to people about? What do you do? Like this, so incredibly uncomfortable. So I think even people who maybe might identify as extroverted or not fully buy into being introverted still get hung up on networking. So I think maybe there's a little bit of introversion in all of us, whether
Right.
we're learning and development or not.
Definitely. Kim has a good point. I'm going to get to a couple questions that we have real quick.
Yeah.
Kim is asking, how do you think that liking other people is related to being a good ID? That is, can someone be a good ID if they don't like people? Kim's been thinking on it. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that you don't have to like people to build relationships with them. So I think like the liking piece is hard, right? I'm pretty close knit with the people that are in my inner circle. Like the people that I spend my time around that I would say that I like are a very small amount of people. But in terms of like ID work, especially most of my ID work has been in higher ed. I've had a couple of corporate contracts, but a lot of that is like project management, which is so much about building relationships and getting your subject matter experts, your SMEs, to do the things that you need them to do. You have to have some rapport with them. So I don't know that you have to have rapport or that you have to like someone to have rapport with them, but I do think you have to be willing to be open to building a relationship with them, getting to know them a bit. I think I guess a big benefit to getting to know somebody is then they kind of open up to you. So like if you think somebody's just kind of rude, but then you like start to get to know them and you actually realize that they're insecure, those are very different things, right? I can help them through their insecurity of feeling not good enough and help them get the things that they need to get done, versus if I think someone's just rude and I don't like them, I'm not willing to help them, not interested in it. So I kind of always go toward people instead of away from people. And I think that really can benefit instructional designers for sure.
You know, Kim also has kind of a follow-up on this one. This is really interesting. She's asking about what about caring about or liking the end learner? And is that even something that should be part of the equation? Like to my way of thinking, like when you're as an instructional designer, is that something? Because when I think about caring about and liking, that kind of has an emotional component to it,
Mm-hmm.
and whether or not that should even be part of the instructional design process.
Mm-hmm.
But do you have anything on that, on Kim's question there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that instructional design processes are really analytical and they're a lot less about whether or not I'm willing to do something for someone because of if I like them or not. And I think they're more about like, what is it that I hope that they get out of this? So I'd love to hear an example and of something that folks really don't care about, for instance. But I think that for me, just being an instructional designer and wanting to design well, I inherently care about my learners, mostly because I want it to do well, not so much because I'm like really engaged with the learners, because I'm a little bit far removed, right? So I work with faculty all day long, super care about them, and my courses eventually get to students, but I don't get to see in the same way that if I was teaching the immediate like aha moments or that it's connecting and working well for them. I have to wait for some feedback and then do a review process and do it all over again. Mm-hmm. So I think it's less for me about caring about them and more about caring about the product that I want them to have a great learning experience. I want it to be helpful. I want it to be evidence-based. I want it to really land for them. And that is less, again, for me about liking them and more about just really loving what I do.
Yes. Great. That's a thought-provoking question. That one's going to sort of stick in my head for a while. Thanks for bringing that one up, Kim. And Christina's saying, I think you can care for people, your stakeholders, SMEs, learners, and still be introverted. Definitely. Mm-hmm. Gosh, I'm probably going to turn this one into a community discussion for later, Kim. So expect maybe we can have a panel or something where we can discuss that one. Now let me get, there's this other question in here from Mark who's asking, okay, so before we get into some of this heavy duty stuff, but maybe you have, so this kind of goes along with the whole idea of turning your introversion into like a superpower.
Yes.
Right. So that's one of my questions for you. And then also Mark is asking in the Q&A area about books, articles, groups that support those with introvert, superpowers. We can get to that at the end because, we have more information from you directly about that. But that idea about turning introversion into a superpower, can you give us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think I'll start it off with saying that everybody has strengths. And just because my strength isn't your strength doesn't mean that it's less valuable.
Mhm.
So it's a really cool mindset shift to then think about, like, if I'm extroverted or introverted, what are my strengths and how can I play to those in anything that I do? So I often talk about introversion as a superpower because you are able to do things that other people may not be able to do. And that's great. We want all of the strengths at the table. So for instance, my introversion superpower is connecting one-on-one. I'm really great in a one-on-one conversation. I love to hear what's going on for you. I ask about your family. I want to know what your deepest desire is. Like, I'm getting down to some deep questions with people one-on-one, and I walk away from those conversations feeling so fulfilled and so full. So going back to what Christina said in the chat, where you can still care for people and be introverted, you can still have connection with people and be introverted. Now, if I was in a large conference room with 20 people and was being asked to speak, if I didn't feel like I had anything that was really that great to say, I would feel really exhausted from doing that. And likewise, I would feel really exhausted from something that was like a 5-minute chat and then I'm on to the next person because it's just too much. So my introversion power is connecting one-on-one with people. And that may be your introversion power too. And if it's not, that's okay. So I think there are a lot of things that we can kind of sit there and think, like, what are the things I'm really good at? And if those fall in introversion, great. If they don't, great too. And then I think it's more about asking, what are the things that give you energy and what are the things that drain you? And I love talking about energy management because it's not that we should completely avoid something that takes away our energy. It's not that I should always never public speak because I feel so exhausted afterwards. But it's about really strategizing your time so that you are giving yourself energy fulfilling things before and after or throughout the week, however it works best for you. But energy is not something that you just lose and never get back. It's a total renewable resource and you're able to get that back. So I always like to pair my superpower with things that I love and things that give me energy. Now, there are some superpowers that I have that don't give me energy, and that's okay too. But I can go back and give myself some energy. For instance, like journaling is one of the things that if I have time alone with my thoughts, I can really write it out and not talk to anybody else about it. That's going to fill me up. So I know that, like, after an event like this, if I'm feeling a little bit drained, then I immediately have some strategies in my bucket that will give me that energy back.
And I think that from what I've read, especially for introverts, a huge part of it is the recovery, right? Is being able to manage that piece of it. Like, and I can tell you, just to share a little bit of my own personal story, is, I am not like, this is not me being a host for a virtual broadcast on a regular basis was never my plan at all, like zero. I mean, I was so painfully shy when I was a kid, like in high school and college, that literally when I was put in a situation where I have to speak to people, I would start to shake. I mean, I would start to shake and tremble and would just do ridiculously dumb things. Like, I would just wanted to hide. And I really was like so introverted that, that I just wouldn't show up to stuff, like to, I couldn't go to class because I couldn't be around people. So for me to be able to do this is really, it's kind of crazy, but I've just sort of figured it out. But I do have to recover, so after this is done, I don't know. Nowadays it's as simple as, my 8-year-old is home right now. So I'll just go find him and see what he's reading or doing, whatever, and just kind of, give him a hug and stuff. And that actually will help me, like, get back into back to the place that I need to be. So, so I do think that introverts, as long as you can figure out your recovery process, you can manage a lot more.
Yeah. And even like preemptive recovery. So it's like, I know I'm going to have a really, like, for instance, when conferences used to be in person and you go through like session after session, you're meeting all these people. I remember after conferences, I would go back to my hotel room and I would go to bed at like 5 because I was so exhausted. So at that point, like, recovery is no longer an option for me, but I can do things preemptively to help give me some energy to start my day. So like exercising is one of those things that gives me energy. Sunlight, it's an energy source for me. So yeah, definitely, if you can do that ahead of time, knowing that you're going to have a long day or it's going to take a lot out of you for hosting, I think you can do those things and it'll help too.
Totally. So I have to ask just, and I don't know if this is even anything that you can answer, but I feel like I am kind of a digital introvert in that, like, I don't like to post on social media or post, especially on LinkedIn. I can't, like, it actually just hurts me sometimes. Like
Yeah.
anytime, like I'm the one who posts all the TLDC stuff like everywhere, right? So
Yeah.
I don't have anybody else. So you have to, like, if whenever you see those posts, just know that it's me, like, really struggling, just trying to get something posted.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that a little bit? Because it seems like, I mean, I saw your post where you mentioned me and LinkedIn, and it had, like, a big picture, and I'm like, oh, it's like formatted and all, it just looked like a celebration, and I'm like,
Yeah.
this is, that looked really extroverted to me as a
Mm-hmm.
digital introvert. But how about that piece of it? How do you deal with it?
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So I will always come back to boundaries and to having the recovery time and the preemptive time to really recharge myself.
Yeah.
I do not sit on LinkedIn all day long. It is a total drain for me. Mostly it just gives me anxiety. It makes me feel like I'm not doing enough. Because you see all these people that have like 300 likes or,
Achieving so
one of
much.
these, yeah, any of those viral posts, I'm like, damn, I wish I was doing more. So part of it is like my own mental health. Like, I know it's not good for me to sit on social media all day. And I do this with all social medias. I only have LinkedIn and Instagram. And I'm thinking about getting on TikTok, but I think I would waste my life on TikTok if I'm being honest. And I am only on them certain parts of the day, and then I'm off the rest of the time, just because it really can mess with my mental health. And so I'll say with LinkedIn, I set boundaries and I'm really intentional about how I use LinkedIn. So I don't necessarily like schedule posts ahead of time, but I have like posts that I want to write about that week. So I kind of plan what I'm going to say. So that way I don't feel like I have to like have all this pressure if I have nothing to say. If I have nothing to say, I just don't post. And then I also am really intentional about how much time I then like respond to comments. So I, again, just like set like a block of time. For me, it's about 45 minutes, which could be more or less depending on the day. Like, there are some days where I like post and I'm like, I'm not looking at that ever again. And then there are some days where I feel like I have a little bit more energy and can be on there a little bit longer. And then I do not scroll on LinkedIn. I'm really intentional about whose content I am looking for and the notifications that I get. So I actually don't have any notifications on my phone. I don't do like text message notifications or anything because I don't want to be pulled into it. And the same thing is said with any social media. So on Instagram and on LinkedIn, I don't get the notifications. I only am on it when I'm on it, and when I'm off, I'm off. And I find that people are really supportive of boundaries. I actually talk about it quite a bit on my content. And I feel like people really like that content because they themselves feel like they have to be on in order to be successful on LinkedIn. And I think you can do what works for you, and you can still be successful, whatever version of successful that looks like for you.
Yeah, interesting. And I'm going to start to wrap it up here, but
Yeah.
back to sort of Mark's question.
Mhm.
Okay, so mention real quick that you do have a course, and
Yeah.
we need to put a link to your course that is like in the chat so people can check that out. But
Yeah.
how about books, articles, mastermind groups, people that are introverted? Personally, I actually want to know this stuff even for myself, because I mean, I'm in a weird situation where I do this. I've kind of gotten used to it. You know, and I think about it all the time. Do I need to, you know, like, should I just keep doing this, or I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
Like I just keep hosting these broadcasts, but then also like being in a band and singing for a band, like I don't have a problem with that. And what I do when I go up on stage is I don't think about anything except the music. And
Right.
so that is my way of being able to kind of navigate that. But I do want to get better at managing my level of introversion. So is there anything that you've referenced in particular that has helped you?
Yeah, I think that, again, the biggest thing is around energy management, and I'm happy to share with you some links around it, but really just doing kind of an audit in your own life to figure out like what does give you energy and what doesn't. Because there are times where I'm like, yeah, instructional design gives me energy. And I'm like, no, it does not. But I have to be honest with myself and have to have some self-awareness around that. And I think too, like, there's this idea that if you're an introvert, you have to do more. And I think I disagree with that. I think you can just show up as you, and you can be really transparent in your boundaries, and what you're sharing. Like I shared that I was going on vacation and that I would not be on LinkedIn at all for like 6 days. And I usually post like once a day. So people were really respectful for that. People really engage with that. And I don't feel like I have to necessarily show up as something more than I am. I think there's a lot of power of just like being you and not trying to have like this prove it energy. So I would actually challenge you to say like, you're doing everything right. And I think if you wanted to set up more boundaries around the podcast or around any of those pieces, I think you can, and people will hear you out and will respect that. So I'll say that. There are a couple of really great books that I have loved that have really resonated with me. Quiet is one of them by Susan Cain, and then Creating Introvert Friendly Workplaces by Jennifer Kay. Her last name is long, so I can't remember exactly, but I'm happy to share the links with that. And then, yeah, that's a lot of my content is around introversion, around networking, instructional design. So I'm kind of always posting around that. I've had, I just recently had a masterclass around it that had some wild number of 200 people on it. It was insane. But those I will hope to do in the future, just like quick one-off classes. And then I do have a networking program for introverts too, that's built in a way that makes it so that you don't have to show up as an extrovert. You can just show up as you. Let's use your strengths and know that you're welcome here. And it's totally about inclusion for everyone in that space.
Do you tend to gravitate towards other introverts?
Yeah. So my husband is like really, really introverted, and so much to the point he's like, I don't think you're an introvert. And we have to have like discussions around it. I tend to fall like kind of in the middle of introversion and extroversion, if it's a scale, a little bit more introverted. But I'm happy to be social and to chat with people. Definitely need the recovery time. But yeah, I think a lot of my friends tend to be introverted, more introverted than me. Though I don't know, I have some couple of friends that are like extremely extroverted, and maybe that's me at one point in time being like, oh man, I wish I was more. But yeah, I think there's a lot of space for everyone there. Yeah, it's been cool.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that because when I go to conferences, I think that I tend to like to be around other introverts versus being around extroverts. But and then sort of, you know, whatever that little squad is, then we navigate the conference together, and because we know when to give each other space. When you're around like other extroverts, sometimes I know for me it can actually be draining.
Yeah.
Just because they're so social, and then you get involved into situations that you're like, okay, this is a lot.
Yeah. And you know what? I just have really leaned into the boundary with that. Like if I have, even with meetings and work, like it was amazing for me to like realize like I wasn't at the mercy of whatever somebody put on my calendar that I
Yeah.
could cancel. And I could do it. I didn't have to wait for somebody else to do it. So there's been times like even with my boss, and I have a bi-weekly meeting with her. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm just not feeling it. And she's more extroverted. So I think it's what I appreciate out of the people in my life is that I can set boundaries and I don't have to like make an excuse that like, oh, I'm sick, or oh,
Yeah.
I don't have a car, or like whatever
No,
the
that's great. That's
excuse
great.
is. My excuse is that I've peopled too hard and I need to do something else later. So can we reschedule? And I'm very grateful and blessed to have people that really support and love that. So those are the kind of people I try to surround myself with, people that will know that boundaries are good and I
Yeah.
don't have to get dragged into a social situation I don't want to get into.
Nice.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I was about to mention that, Kim. People too hard. I really love that expression. I'm going to use that because
Yeah.
I feel like it's funny. My wife and I, we have the same introvert discussion because she insists that she's like an introvert, even though like, we walk my son to school every day. And as soon as we get to the schoolyard, it's like all of a sudden there are like 10 other mommies around her. And I'm like backing up like, okay, I'll just wait for you over here.
Yeah.
Anyway, all right, so I'm going to wrap it up. Christy, thank you so
Mhm.
much for doing this. Could you put some links down, like to your courses or to whatever, so
Yes.
that people know where to find you? And then I am also interested in like your mentoring experience because it sounds wonderful. Maybe that's something we could talk about at some point.
Yeah, I would love to. And you know what? Networking and mentoring really go hand in hand.
Right.
They
Yeah.
are, especially peer mentoring. Like I think people think that if they haven't been in a position for 8 years or longer, that they have nothing
Yeah.
to give. And oh, is that totally not the case? We all have something to learn from each other. So I
So
would love.
important. I mean, I actually, need to find mentors or, and do all that. But just even right now, I'm just seeing the state of things altogether. Just finding these individual relationships and building community to me is just more important now than
Mhm.
ever. So, yeah, we'll follow up maybe with a conversation about that. I'd love to talk more.
Yeah, that'd be great. And I'm
Okay.
putting in my LinkedIn too. Feel
Okay.
free if anyone wants to send me a message. I'm happy to chat a little further.
Excellent. Christy, thanks so much. Everybody, thanks for joining us today. Yeah, I think we have a community discussion, I believe, next week. Kind of light on the schedule altogether. We've got AIDC, which is the Accessible and Inclusive Design Conference coming up on June 23rd, 24th. Go to theaidc.com if you want to register for that. It's free. It's going to be great. We have the program. We're really working on it. We have a nice a group of folks that are working on building that out, and we'll have everything posted, I'm sure, pretty soon. So register for that. But if anybody has any ideas about other conversations, any other broadcasts, even if you'd like to host a broadcast, let me know. I would love to have you even take the reins here on some of these broadcasts and talk to other guests. We just want to keep the community active and talking and keep folks connected. All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. And broadcast.